So good afternoon and welcome to another edition of STO Building Group Innovation Expo. Today we are here with Dr. Sarah Buchner, founder and CEO of Trunk Tools. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here again. So one of the things we'd just like to ask the people who come here is like, what was the problem that you saw and how did you go about solving it? And knowing that you started in the field, you have this great background in construction coming up for a superintendent, I'm assuming that it all started from that.
Yeah. I always like to say, when people are like, how did you get into construction? Right? They look at me and they're like, that makes no sense. And I always like to say that I've hardly ever met anybody who's in construction voluntarily. And it's the same for me.
Yeah.
I started my career involuntarily as a carpenter when I was a teenager because my dad was a carpenter. We needed more cash for the family, so he brought me in the field. And then I became a foreman, a superintendent, switched to GC side. So I've spent 15-ish years in the field. And at the peak, I was running a $400 million high-rise project, 600 guys on a job. You know the drill.
And is that here in the United States?
No. That was in Europe.
In Europe, okay.
Yeah. And on that high-rise job, we had a fatality on the job. And given that I was one of the highest people on the job, I felt responsible. It was pretty dramatic. And so I decided to look into how I could fix that problem. And so I decided to build a health and safety app. So that was me moving from the field into software. And since then, it has always been like, how can I build something to make this industry that I love deeply better?
Right.
And so I ended up doing a PhD. And a company like yours paid for my PhD, and they were like, okay, if we pay for it, we'll tell you what to write about. I'm like, cool, what do you want me to write about? And they were like, we have so much data, right? There was a large corporation, 20 billion revenue. They were like, we're sitting on billions and billions of data points, and we do absolutely nothing with it.
That's right.
Yeah, and so it was really them who started this process internally where they're like, that is a massive problem, right? And it's a gap in comparison to any other industry in the world that has figured out how to leverage and utilize the data. And so my journey with this company really started almost a decade ago when I did my PhD and figure out what we can do with data.
That's amazing. I think that's probably true what you say. We are probably one of the most fractured industries when it comes to data. And we say this all the time, it's about reshuffling the deck every time you go to a new project.
Yeah. It's terrible.
Right? Even internally, we reshuffle our teams, and externally, we're shuffling our partners, and it's a different client, it's a different building. It's not an assembly line, it's not manufacturing. So solving that problem, I think, is paramount, and I think your company has been really great about getting on that journey and helping us solve that problem. And I think the beauty I love about it is that, so it is a simple problem, right? It's like, it's doing the things that we do to be good builders. Looking through the stack of drawings, looking at the specifications, like looking through all the parts and pieces. And it's like you're almost like a detective trying to find the answers. And now that forensically, right. So tell me about like how that, because you did it, right? You were in the field, you were doing all that stuff. How that concept translated to where you are today.
Yeah. I remember when I was in the field, this was even, again, like 20 years ago, right? This was even before we had all the platforms and the PMSs, right?
So like plan grid and things like that.
Stuff was paper, right? Like, so I still had this backpack with all the drawings and like walked out on the side, right? And then you would try to figure it out like on printed paper. So part of my PhD was to figure out what we can do with the data. And so whatever, a year plus in, right? Like you're this little researcher somewhere in your basement. And a year plus in, I was like, we can do absolutely nothing because our data is completely unstructured. And that's actually, now that I know more about it, it's even crazier, right? Construction has a massive data problem because the data is unstructured. It's all stupid PDFs. It is siloed between like 10, 20 different software systems, and it's constantly changing, right? Like we get like 10 new RFIs a day and new drawings and new versions and all of that stuff. So if you think about these three problems, it's impossible to do anything with it. So while I was a researcher, we paid people in a third world country to clean data and structure data so that Mrs. Researcher can like do her research, which is economically absurd, right? And so when large language models came on the market and AI, I mean, my PhD was in AI, but when it really became clear that the models were getting better and better, that was the time and place, and we were always, there was luck involved, but this is when we knew like, hey, we can actually use the most cutting edge technology to solve this massive problem we had in construction for decades.
Right. So you knew the problem, you knew what the solution was,
I had to wait for the
advancements.
technology.
Yeah, exactly. That's what kind of like accelerated and put
Yeah.
it all together, which is, I think, really cool. So we were talking about how the technology finally catches up to your idea and it gets implemented. So not only are we siloed in the data that we keep for the different things, the different applications, but then we're siloed between us and the architect and the engineer
Yeah.
and the client and the owner's rep and all that. So how do you envision that? Because even right now, our use case is that we're just going to be using our internal STO building group data to put a great tool in our superintendent's hands and our project team's hands. What's your vision to incorporate all of those other silos?
Yeah, I think I've been in construction too long to believe that we're fundamentally going to change. And so I was a big opponent of BIM when it came out. I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. Everybody's working in this one place and a single source of truth. And it's never going to happen because the industry is built upon silos and it's built upon not sharing certain parts of information because that's how we allocate risk and that's how we all make money, right? So I think the way I'm envisioning this is what's happening nowadays with agents, right? It's like the buzzword of 2025. But what an AI agent actually is, an AI workflow, an AI agent is an AI workflow that is really good, or it's getting really good about communicating between different software tools or between different humans. And so I foresee a future where STO has their agents that are perfectly collecting data within their world and within their system. And then there is collaboration agents between STO and the architect or between you and the owner. And those agents are allowed to, give a certain amount of data or, and like filter it out again. I think that's probably.
So they're actually like different experts on your team.
It's the exact same as we do it with humans right now.
Exactly, right.
It's funny that like we keep on trying to explain to the industry that there's not one AI, right? It's always like DAI. There's no DAI, right? It's like multiple. Like we currently have hundreds of different models that we use for different parts of our tool. But there's also not going to be one agent. It's not going to be one Rob Leon agent.
Right.
There's going to be, we always like to say, we're not doing AI, we're doing IA, intelligence augmentation, right?
Sure.
You're going to be augmented with 50 agents, maybe 500, whatever. And those 50 agents take over different tasks. One is ordering your Uber. The other one is trying to figure out what to eat for dinner tonight. And the third one is trying to figure out how to communicate with your employee, right?
Exactly. And I think there's a lot of fear about AI. You probably have some people all the way on the right side saying it's doomsday, and you have other people thinking that it's the best thing in the world and there's nothing it can't do, and we're focusing on the middle, just fix the middle. So from your point of view, like who would you think your best customer is?
Right now?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm so biased, but I love people in the field, right? That's where I come from. Like I spent most of my career with a hard hat. And so I love solving problems for them because I deeply believe that you actually lose your margins and your construction sites in the field. Sure. Yes, estimation is a problem and whatever, and scheduling, but the real, like when stuff hits the fan, it's in the field. And it's, in my mind, it's also the hardest job of everything, right? It's actually like managing the intensity and the craziness in the field. And so that's our preferred uses because I think that's where we all come from.
So from construction manager down to subcontractor as well.
Yeah, PM, PE, PXs, you name it, but also the subs. We see a lot of very sophisticated subcontractors, also biased. I love subcontractors, but I don't see a strong difference there. Do I want to sell to architects right now? No, because it's just a different approach of what we're solving.
Got it. So tell me some of the challenges and struggles you've had in developing and then also getting it pushed out there in the world.
I think if we knew on day one how complex technically the problem is, I don't know if we would be here. And so it's funny, every time we are solving one layer we're peeling one layer of the onion, we realize that the next layer is even harder to solve. And so I give you an example. Take an average high-rise in New York, $500 million high-rise. A high-rise like this has 3-4 million pages of documentation to be built. If you go back into your days where everything was paper, if you actually were to print 4 million pages of paper, the stack of paper is 3 times as high as the building. That's a problem, right? Yeah. Then contractually, you as a GC, you say okay, yes, owner, I built this exactly as specified on 4 million pages of documentation. That's impossible. So even like as soon as you sign a contract, you know you're going to mess it up, right? And so for us to take 4 million pages on one single job and pre-process it in a way to actually get to structured data and make that structured data available to a human in a very easy, in a semantic way, that's a real hard task. And I always love because our tool, like Trunk Tools, looks really simple, right? You ask a question, you get an answer. And the simplicity is beautiful. But what's behind it is really, really hard.
Yeah.
To give you an example, like we take every question and we rephrase it. So like we have an AI that's just there to rephrase whatever input question came in, because we don't want to rely on humans asking the right question. And so then we rephrase it, let's say, in 12 different ways. And then we start 12 different ways of answering the question. But then we do this with each other, right? So it creates a matrix of answers that we then measure against probabilities of like how good is the answer.
Right. Yeah, I think that's important to know. I think that understanding that what is behind the scenes is very important to the people who are afraid of AI.
Yeah.
Right? Because like you said, it isn't that one big brain, right? It's multiple brains, collaboration with the brains. I think that the other thing that like we struggle with internally is not just that it's something new, that it's something that we put out there. We're obviously worried about like what happens with that data as it's being used, as your models keep learning from it. Let's talk a bit about that and kind of like try to assuage the fear of what is happening with our data or our clients' data.
Yeah. So again, there's not one AI, at least not in our use case, and maybe there's other people who treat this differently, right? We are very careful around what we are training into the AI at which step. But I give you an example. We have an AI that can identify a random PDF and can look at the PDF and say, like, is this an RFI, or is it a drawing, or is it a specification, right? Seems super simple to us human. It's actually really important for what we do, right? Because we take data dumps from SharePoint, and there is like hundreds of thousands of flattened PDFs. And then our AI needs to figure out, should I look at this as an RFI, or is this a submittal or whatever, right? So that is a good example for an AI that we've specifically trained for the industry, purely based on de-identified aggregated customer data. But what do you care if we know how an RFI is structured or not?
That's just going to help strengthen the tool for us.
Exactly. Right. But like that's what we obviously need customer, again, an anonymous de-identified customer.
Well, that's the thing. So the information on the PDF means nothing. Exactly. It's not what it is. Yeah. And I think that's that's what we have to make sure people understand.
Yeah, but like for us, it's important to understand. If I look at an RFI, here's the date, here's the content. Yeah, so the structure itself, right?
Absolutely.
Like, but nobody cares about that. Like this is not confidential information. This is not your IP. You don't care. And so that is something, for example, that we train across customers, right? So like we train models that identify, is it an RFI or is it a drawing across customer, because it benefits everybody. If we are training an AI specifically on this high rise and this like in the content, then this is only for this one project and only for you. And as soon as you're done with this project, everything gets deleted, right? Pretty much you can think about. That's why we like to call the AI brains, right? We create a brain for one job. The job is done, the brain dies. Like nobody uses this anymore, right? But then a better example maybe is when you learned how to read a blueprint or drawing, you learned it from actual drawings, right? So now you know this is a door, this is a wall, but you forgot the original blueprints that you looked at or those you learned from. And I think that's a better way for people to think about it, right?
Just I think it's a great way to put it.
Yeah, you know how to read a drawing because you read a lot of drawings.
It's all the structure. It's like, I know that if I have to go find this detail, that's the symbol I'm looking for.
Yeah.
That's the page I have to go to.
Yeah.
It's not that I remember exactly what that detail was specifically.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's a great way to put it. And I think again, we have to sort of get to that tipping point where we're using it more. We're seeing the improvements on the model and the improvements on the tool, quite honestly, and seeing that acceleration happens. Once we see that acceleration happen and people realize that it is not sort of like the downfall of data sharing, right? We're not doing anything wrong. It's not going into the public domain. The information that we have on our projects is not going out to public domain.
No, and we wouldn't exist as a business if that's what we do, right? And honestly, I'm a board member, I would go into jail, right? So
Correct.
I definitely don't want to do that. So we are very careful around that. But again, I think people look at this as one AI there's no one AI. There's like hundreds of different models that are really good at one specific task and so on. And so that's how you can segregate it, and that's how you can make sure that there's no, we call this reverse engineerable. Like you can't reverse engineer a lot of the information. And so that's where we need to focus in. And then lastly, think about, we get the question a lot, like, can you just use ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever it is? And it's like, go try this with a drawing. Like our industry is very specific, it's very niche, right? And so we are spending tens of millions of dollars training AIs to read drawings, two-dimensional blueprints, right?
That's right.
If we would all do BIM, then maybe nobody needs
100%.
structals.
Which is really the right way to do things in the future, right? 'Cause
BIM?
BIM, yeah, well, it's sort of like a model-based delivery,
Yeah.
right? Where everybody's integrated into the model.
Yeah, but again, like, I mean, 95% of the market does not work like
They
that.
don't work like that. But we're talking about a certain way of doing a process inside of a model, which then the client at the back end actually gets a living, breathing, usable model to do different things that they need to do. Not just maintain their space that we've given them, but they can run economic different things to like. They can do so many different things with a living, breathing model, digital twin.
BIM as an industry tool to get people to collaborate is a good idea, but I feel like the underlying idea about BIM was building information modeling, right? When you actually think of it, like, BIM as an idea is not necessarily a 3D model. We actually argue that we're doing the best BIM in the market because we are creating a data model around your approach, purely data-based. It doesn't look pretty. Right? And so what we have developed is an ontology for the whole industry. To your point before, every job is different, but if you break every job down, it's the same concrete, it's the same steel, it's the same drywall. And so we have developed our own ontology where we bring together IFC from the 3D model plus the 2D dimensional or 1D data out of schedules, specs, RFIs, whatever, and create one data model, what we call a knowledge graph, for each job, right? And so is that BIM? I would say yes, right? But it doesn't look pretty.
Sure, no, totally understand. So let me ask you this. What have we talked about some of the challenges, right? What about some of your successes?
The biggest success is that you guys signed. You know?
That's a good sign. That's a very good thing. And we'll get there. We'll put it out there more often. But like, is there like that point in time when things were going along, and there's always those early struggles, and all of a sudden, like, there's like an aha moment. You think, wow, this just clicked.
Yeah.
Do you have that recollection, and what was that?
I have a few of these, right? I think like the first time I saw trunk text respond from a drawing, that was really magical, where it was like, because everybody can do like LLMs on text, right? And like even tables is slightly harder, but the first time it like responded, I was asking something about, I don't know, something about a drawing or like clearance height or something, and it understood conceptually what it saw on the drawing, and it found the one number we were looking for, and it responded like that. I was like, wow, that's a breakthrough, because that was the connection of vision models and language models, which is hard, right? That's real multimodal there.
Sure. Well, I think that's a cool thing, right? It's like, that's one of those things where I guess it's acting more human at that point.
Yeah.
Right? It's acting more intuitively of the things that you would say before, of like, how do you not replace what a superintendent or a project engineer is doing, but how are you making their jobs easier and faster and more efficient, more accurate, quite honestly.
No, I mean, now the story's coming, right? So I think like one of my favorite one is a superintendent, early user, right? And it was clunky early on, right? It's a startup. He came to me, and it was the time where we needed to make decisions. How much more money are we investing? Are we keep going or not? And as a founder, you always have these like near-death scenarios, right? Sure. And so, I called him and I was like, "How do you really feel about this?" I was like, "Don't take it away." I'm like, "Okay, like calm down, like, but like let's talk about it. Like, why?" I just like won against my most annoying subcontractor. I was like, why? He's like, yeah, because he always like knows the contract better and he knows his like the specs better and everything. And so like we were in a meeting and he said like, that's not part of my contract. And while like he was arguing and yelling, the superintendent under the table like texted trunk text. And it responded back and it said like, turn the phone around. It was like, no, this is part of your contract. So turn around and do your work.
Yeah.
And so it was this moment, and I've been in the field for so long that it was like winning against the sub or against the owner or whoever you're fighting against, right? Like, that's just like such a pleasure.
It's true, but it takes away some of that static that always exists in a job. It takes our focus away from what we should be doing, right? We should be concentrating on safety and quality and getting the job done.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, we want to produce a product for the client that has that has all of those things together, instead of the bickering and that goes on at every job meeting.
Yeah.
So it takes away a lot of the static. That's what I love about it. What's like next on the horizon? What's like the big next thing for Trunk Tools?
Scale.
Scale.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Well, I think with scale, the tool gets better.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously that's how AI works, but it's really a big focus for us 2025 is just scale, get this to more people and so on, and get it out of like just people testing and actually like just like we have a few enterprise rollouts. We need more of that. A, because of revenue, but B, also because we ultimately want to give this into people's hands so that the tool learns and that we learn of like how we can make it even better. The second big one is exciting. We're going publicly releasing in early May a new agent that can now detect RFIs and forecast RFIs before they ever happen without any human involvement.
So it's kind of doing a QA, QC through the drawings, right? A review, giving you here's where we have some issues.
Yeah, exactly. And
Awesome.
it's not just drawings, right? It's comparing like different document types with each other.
Drawing and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's doing I would say, database clash detection.
It's great.
That has never been possible before. And the only way this is possible is by doing the whole pre-processing and the knowledge graph and everything that I described before. And that is just so powerful.
Yeah.
Like an average hire-is is like, I think like 2,000 RFIs. Like that's 2,000 times where the site got stopped, people's work got interrupted because we don't actually know what we want to build. So it creates delays in the schedule, it overruns the budget, there's all the claims, the fights between the different parties. That's just against what anybody wants. And it's interesting in our, $14 trillion industry, we did a study, about 6.5% of all construction cost is because of data discrepancies. So we're talking about $1 trillion of economic loss every year.
Right.
If we could, and by the way, 4% of the world's CO2 emissions. So I can get my plastic straw back if we just roll out trunk tools all over the world and we just saved global warming, right? It's just, if you think about it, the impact that construction has on everything is so massive.
I think it's great.
Yeah.
Well, I think that gets you into the hands of the design side.
Yeah.
And then the client's going to love it because now you're kind of like doing the QA QC. You're scrubbing the drawings, so less risk of change orders from discrepancies, like you said.
It's not perfect right now.
It's not
right?
perfect,
It's learning.
but it will be, right? That's the beginning.
Yeah.
And it then gets there. So to the point of streamlining the industry, streamlining the process, putting a great tool in the hands of the people who need it most, who are on the field. I think you have a great future going with you, and I hope we can grow with you.
I mean, that's the plan.
Sarah, thank you so much for joining.
No, I appreciate the partnership, and I think, I'm very excited to see this flourish with you guys.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, everybody, for watching, and join us next month when we have another edition of STO Building Group Innovation Expo.